Hi, everyone. I'm back here again. This is Vic, and I have another use case of leveraging Gen AI in go-to-market. For those of you who have been following me, you'll see that a lot of my posts on Gen AI for go-to-market deal with solving small use cases. This isn't about transforming the entire go-to-market function using Gen AI. The place where the current technology is, what I'm noticing is that there are point solutions that do certain parts of the go-to-market workflow. That being said, I also see the need for certain smaller pieces of workflow that would fall under the too small for somebody to really spend their time getting somebody to build or to buy a product for, but you still have that need. It reminds me of my days at Tableau when people had Excel and they wanted to analyze it, and there just was no tool for it till Tableau came along and you could just connect to your Excel and do your own analysis. Um, so this is an example where I am basically think about a situation. A lot of us from a sales standpoint are very aware of the situation. You have a meeting with an executive, or you are looking to do some outreach with an executive. And as part of that outreach, you just don't want to send them, hey, hello, or some generic messaging. You want to send them something personalized. And there are lots of tools out there that will let you do kind of what I would call first level personalization based on, oh, I see you studied here, I studied here, you work here, I work here, so and so kind of stuff. But what I've been trying to do is to get to that next level of personalization where I've actually done some research into their initiatives. Um, and rather than just talk about their initiatives, what I want to do is to point them to certain use cases, snippets from use cases, value statements from use cases that would be relevant to that executive's use case. And so if you were to think about how I would do this today, if it was just manually without any kind of AI, um, basically I would go research the executive priorities for that particular executive, look through. And again, for now, let's assume that my only source of information is going to be public sources, so news article, podcasts. Obviously, if I have something more specific where I've either bought the research or I've had a call with somebody in the organization, those could be sources too. But least common denominator, I'm a rep, I'll go look at some news articles, podcasts to do some research about that executive. The next thing I would like to do is also research priorities of the role. So if I know I'm talking to a CFO versus a CIO, I might want to tailor my message a bit differently. So I would love to know what priorities are top of mind for, say, a CFO or a CIO or a CTO or a chief customer officer, and then go find relevant snippets from case studies that I could target to them. Now, once I've got this research done, then I typically spend some time reading through it, understanding it, collating it, summarizing it, getting my kind of arms around what are the top 2 or 3 things that this executive cares about or this role should care about. Then what I do is I go to my case study repository. This is, working for any organization like Gong or whatever it is. I go get a list of case studies. I try and read the case studies, try to find something which was most relevant. Where if I knew that somebody was trying to increase win rates, I'd like to find a case study which tied to that. Or if somebody was looking to generate more pipeline, I'd love to find a case study which talked about that. And then I would generate a research brief and then put it in a Google Doc that I would then use to, let's say, do my outreach. And if you think about this particular process, let's say it takes me about an hour to do per executive. And so the question is, can I do this faster with Gen AI? So the obvious answer is yes, but you need the right tools. And it goes beyond just the standard, using something like a Perplexity to go ask questions. Because with Perplexity, I could ask it questions on, I could give it the name of the executive, the title, and the company, and it could come back and it would tell me, it would search the web, come back with the priorities, come back with what the priorities for that particular role are. So that's the easy part. Where Perplexity will start struggling is if I were to now say, now use those priorities to go research, go look through my case studies, which are sitting somewhere else, could be, PDFs that I have internally or could be on my website, and then somehow connect the two of those and then pull snippets and quotes that are absolutely relevant to the executive's priorities or to that particular role's priorities. And so what I'm going to show you in a demo is how I did this with AnyQuest. And the reason why AnyQuest kind of goes beyond ChatGPT, goes beyond SearchGPT, goes beyond Perplexity, is that to be able to take these priorities that you've done research from the web, to then go pull relevant snippets, you need what is known as an architecture framework in Gen AI called Retrieval Augmented Generation, or RAG, where basically I want to be able to feed it 10, 20, 30 use cases. But the problem is I cannot take all of that and load it into the context window and just put it into a prompt and say, go now, find the priorities and go, pick the ones. The other thing which is also tricky is I want to do one prompt to find the priorities, one prompt to find the roles priorities. Then I want to say, take these executive priorities, now go look against my case studies. And all of that is going to be really, really hard. And you could have your IT team go develop this, but then they're probably busy developing much more sophisticated applications. And so what AnyQuest lets me do is basically, I think of it as a Tableau for Gen AI, where I can, as a business savvy stakeholder, go do this RAG functionality myself. And so what I'm going to show you is AnyQuest. The first thing I did is in my AnyQuest workspace, I created a folder called RAG. You could call it whatever you want. And I went and uploaded a bunch of case studies. And so I want to take a real scenario. So let's say I'm a sales executive working at a company called Pigment. Just so happens there are a bunch of Tableau people over there. And so I went to the Pigment website and I downloaded about 11 case studies that were public. I don't need anything else. And so you could go and look at each one of these. I basically just did a screenshot of their website, uploaded the information as PDF, and it basically has information. It talks about, quotes from key people. It's got, why they use it, stuff like that. It's probably got some ROI statements, value statements that are there. You can envision, if your headcount is growing, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, point being that I have some case studies. And obviously, the quality of the output depends on the quality of the case studies. If I were to officially get these from Pigment, I could upload all of them and really do this in a much better way. So that's the kind of RAG part of it. I've uploaded this. What AnyQuest is doing under the covers is taking this, breaking it into chunks, putting it into a vector database, so that it's all organized so that I can then, when I ask my prompt, it can go and pick the right piece from the different case studies, combine it together, and send it to the LLM. The next piece then is I wanted to build this in a repeatable way, so I need to build an agent. And again, for those of you who've seen some of my demos of AnyQuest, what I love about it, again, is this kind of drag and drop interface where I can chain a bunch of prompts together. I can also now chain retrieval from my repository, all done in a visual way. And so here is an example. This is my agent. I'm basically giving it some context. You're an expert researcher, B2B marketer that can understand key priorities and initiatives of executives, so you can build highly targeted and relevant messaging. And then it starts off, I say enter the name, title, and company of the executive you're meeting. And then I do two things. One is I just organize this into an object so that I can structure this so I can send it to the right prompts. The other thing I do is I'm saying go research Pigment. So now this is where AnyQuest in this particular generate activity is going to go use web search to go search the web to understand what Pigment does. And just I wanted to return, let's say 5 bullet points about what Pigment's value proposition is. Then what I do is, and so these lines are basically saying pass all this information. So what AnyQuest does, which I like a lot, is that it's not just a serial workflow. You can parallelize stuff, you can pass things, you can pass parameters from one activity to another. For those who've used Alteryx, it's kind of, in my mind, reminds me of Alteryx in terms of putting things together. And so here is now what I do is I'm basically saying you're an expert researcher. So this is my second prompt. So this I've done research on Pigment. I've organized the information into a structured output. I am passing that information to the executive initiatives. And here's what I'm saying. I'm giving you some information on what Pigment does. And so here that comes from this Gen 13. So that's passed on. And then I'm basically saying you've been tasked with identifying key initiatives and priorities for Gen 1, which is basically passing the information that I had given, the name, executive, and title. Please focus on those initiatives that are relevant to Pigment. Now that I've passed the information on Pigment, it knows exactly. So why I'm doing this is I'm not just saying, go get me initiatives. Like if I were to say for a CIO, it could get me all kinds of initiatives. But I'm basically saying, no, get me those initiatives that are relevant to Pigment. So I needed to pass some information on what Pigment does. And then you also, I might say, do not return initiatives like, DNI and stuff like that. It's a good example of where an executive might, have a big priority around diversity and inclusion. But Pigment is a product that is focused at CFO around planning, ops people and finance people around planning. And so diversity and inclusion is not that relevant. And then please make sure that they are specific to this particular person, not generic initiatives, and then return the top 3 initiatives most relevant to Pigment with links to the sources. Then what I do is, the other part of it is I'm also saying now, just get me information that is relevant to the title of the person. So on one hand, I did research on the particular person itself. On the other hand, I'm saying get me information that is specific to a particular title. So if, say, let's say I'm meeting a CFO, what are priorities relevant to a CFO? And it's the same thing. I'm giving you some information on Pigment, identify key initiatives and priorities for executive with the title CFO, let's say, or CIO or CTO as relates to Pigment. And looking at these, please focus on those that are relevant to Pigment. Do not return diversity and inclusion as an example, return the top 3 initiatives, and that's that. So this is kind of the first part. Now you could do this with, absolutely you could do this with Perplexity. It would go search the web and get you this information if you wanted to. But where it becomes interesting now is, remember that folder where I had uploaded case studies? What I am now saying is, I'm passing this information to my retrieve activity and basically saying only get those little snippets or chunks from the case studies that are relevant to this particular executive based on that executive's priorities. In this case, it's only going to go get those segments, which are those segments of documents and case studies which are relevant to a CFO. And after that, all I'm saying is now use the case study snippets. So it went through all those 12 or 13 case studies, picked all the various snippets from there, and then I said, give me 3 value statements and 3 quotes which are relevant to the initiative of this executive. And here I'm saying, give me 3 value statements and 3 quotes which are relevant to somebody with this particular title. Couple things. Obviously, I'm using web search, so I can only be so accurate. I only gave it 11 case studies, so I can only be so accurate. As you can imagine, if I had specific priorities, I could upload that. If I had more case studies, I could upload that, and it just becomes better as you put more data in. And when you run this, basically, I'm going to show you the output. What I did was I basically say run this for Christina Liu, who's the CFO at, let's say, Sigma Computing. And I'll take you through activities one by one. So the first one basically was a summary of what Pigment does. So the generate 13 over there, what it did was it went and it basically came back and said, this is what Pigment does. It found like 5 key things. So this is useful information, so I can now pass this on. Then this is basically using information about Christina. These are the key initiatives and priorities relevant to Pigment. And so she is very focused on growth and scaling of operations, enhanced data-driven decision-making, navigating financial complexity and regulatory compliance. And again, very specific to, as if you are somebody who works for Pigment and you are selling to a CFO at Sigma Computing, you now know specifically what Christina cares about. These are the 3 things, and there are sources to where this information is coming from, and I've got that information. The next one, if you remember, was persona-based. So I'm now saying, forget Christina, what do CFOs care about? And so here, what I've now gone and done is, for the CFOs, they care about cost optimization and efficiency, digital transformation, more strategic use of data and analytics. And so now you're seeing how I found priorities for the role. I found priorities for that particular executive based on what they're talking. What I now want to do is to use this to go get snippets from case studies. And so that's what this retrieve is doing. And so now if you look at the snippets, you'll now notice I have value statements relevant to Christina coming from those case studies. 80% reduction in monthly reporting time. Anchor Store utilized Pigment to streamline the reporting processes. 70% reduction in time required for monthly reporting. And you can see where it is. You can see where the source is, who said that, 30% time monthly closing process. Obviously, this is only going to be as good as the case studies I upload. And so if you have a lot more case studies, it's able to get more targeted information. And it also pulled some quotes. We do this all the time as salespeople. We go look at the case studies, you want to pull out and say, hey, so-and-so saying this, you should care about it. Or say, here's a financial controller at Planety. They've, what are they saying? And, what is the value of Pigment to them? And then this is like the data piece of it. And I had another one around basically value statement for CFOs. If you know that cost reduction efficiency gains are important to you, I can tell you, hey, Cheers achieved 80% reduction in monthly supply chain planning time, inventory levels that help reduce costs, enhance digital transformation. Now, again, there is an element of knowledge management to get the RAG to work better. The quality of data matters. But this is just to show you how I was able to quickly build something in AnyQuest just as a business user, pull this information out from all these different case studies. Hopefully you found this interesting. Give me a share, give me a like. If you're interested in knowing how to do this for your organization, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.